The air in the Charleston hotel suite was thick with the scent of lilies and hairspray, a cloying combination that clung to the back of my throat. It was the day I had been waiting for, the day I had dreamed of since I first held my son Mark in my arms, his wedding day. I'd spent weeks searching for the perfect dress, a tasteful dusty blue lace number that was elegant but wouldn't overshadow the bride. In my purse, nestled in a velvet box, was the reason I'd arrived early: my grandmother's locket, a delicate piece of silver filigree passed down through generations, meant to be a symbol of welcome, of one family becoming another. But the welcome I'd imagined was nowhere to be found. Amanda, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, stood before me like a queen surveying her court. Her white dress was a magnificent cascade of silk and pearls, but her smile was as cold as the diamond on her finger. She'd been laughing with her bridesmaids, a gaggle of young women who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, but the moment she saw me, the laughter died in her throat. She glided over, her movements smooth and predatory. "Helen," she said, her voice a saccharine whisper that didn't quite mask the steel beneath. "You're here." "Of course, dear," I replied, my own smile feeling suddenly fragile. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. I actually have something for you." I started to open my purse, but she placed a perfectly manicured hand on mine, stopping me. Her nails were long and blood red. "That won't be necessary," she said, her eyes flicking over my dress with a dismissive air. She leaned in closer, the scent of her expensive perfume overwhelming. Her voice dropped so only I could hear the venom. "In fact, you're not needed here. Mark and I have everything under control. You can just find your seat and try to blend in." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not needed. After 28 years of being everything Mark needed, mother, father, confidant and provider, I was being relegated to the status of an inconvenient piece of furniture. I thought of the scraped knees, the late-night homework sessions, the second job I took to pay for his college tuition, the countless sacrifices made out of a love so fierce it was the very core of my being. And this woman, this stranger with cold eyes and a colder heart, thought she could erase all of it with a single cruel whisper. For a fleeting second, the sting of it threatened to bring tears to my eyes, but then something else took over, a quiet, unshakable calm, because this was the moment I had, unfortunately, been preparing for. A slow smile spread across my face, a genuine one this time, fueled by a certainty she couldn't possibly comprehend. I leaned in, my voice just as soft as hers, but carrying a weight that made her flinch. "Then watch what I'm about to do." I saw a flicker of confusion, maybe even fear, in her eyes before she masked it with a brittle smile and turned away. She didn't know about the man she was about to marry, the real Mark, the one I had protected and perhaps enabled for too long. She didn't know about the secrets he'd buried, secrets he thought were safe, and she certainly didn't know about the thick, cream-colored envelope resting next to the velvet box in my purse. It wasn't a family heirloom, it was a truth bomb. She thought she could push me out of my son's life, but she was about to learn that a mother's love is a force of nature, and she had just stepped into the path of the storm. Before we go any further with this story, I need to ask you for a quick favor. A lot of people have been saying that YouTube has been unsubscribing them from their favorite channels without any warning, so could you please take a second to check if you're still subscribed? It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for the channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to it. My journey to this suffocatingly sweet-smelling bridal suite began decades ago, in a cramped apartment in Chicago that always smelled of stale coffee and my own exhaustion. Mark's father had left when Mark was 2, a ghost who faded into a collection of broken promises and unpaid bills. It was just the two of us against the world. I worked as a nurse, picking up every extra shift I could, My days a blur of beeping machines and worried families, my nights filled with bedtime stories, and packing Mark's lunch for the next day. I remember one winter when Mark was 7, he wanted a bicycle for Christmas more than anything, a shiny red one he'd seen in a department store window. There was no way I could afford it. I took on a weekend job cleaning offices, the smell of industrial bleach replacing the antiseptic scent of the hospital. I'd come home long after he was asleep, my back aching, my hands raw, and tiptoe into his room to watch him sleep, his small face so peaceful. On Christmas morning, the look of pure, unadulterated joy when he saw that red bike leaning against the wall, that was my payment, that was my fuel. Our bond was everything. We had our own little rituals, Sunday morning pancakes, Friday night movies with a giant bowl of popcorn between us. I was his biggest cheerleader at every soccer game, my voice hoarse from shouting his name. When he got his acceptance letter to the University of Illinois, we danced around the living room, tears of joy streaming down both our faces. I sold my old car, the one I'd had for 15 years, to help pay for his dorm supplies and textbooks. It was a sacrifice, like all the others, that I made without a second thought, because for him, I would move mountains. Then during his senior year of college, he met Amanda. The first time he brought her home for Thanksgiving, I tried my best. I cooked for 2 days straight, making all of Mark's favorite dishes. Amanda walked in, looked around our modest, love-filled home, and gave a tight little smile. "It's cozy," she said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. She spent most of the dinner scrolling through her phone, showing Mark pictures of a recent trip to Europe her parents had funded. She picked at my turkey, asking if it was organic, and pushed the mashed potatoes around her plate, commenting on the carb content. Mark, blinded by infatuation, didn't seem to notice. He just watched her with a goofy, lovesick grin, laughing a little too loudly at her bland jokes. Over the next 2 years, I watched her systematically change him. He traded his comfortable jeans and flannel shirts for designer labels I knew he couldn't afford. He started talking about wanting to join the exclusive country club her father belonged to. Our Sunday pancake tradition faded, replaced by brunch dates at trendy, overpriced restaurants. He'd call me, but the calls became shorter, more perfunctory. He was always on his way to meet Amanda's parents, or some of her influential friends. The wedding planning was where her campaign of exclusion went into overdrive. I'd offer suggestions, based on our family traditions, or simply on trying to be more budget conscious. "Oh Helen, that's a sweet old-fashioned idea," Amanda would say, "but we're going for a more modern, sophisticated vibe." Every idea I had was gently but firmly dismissed. I offered to help address invitations. She told me she'd hired a calligrapher. I asked about the cake tasting. She said she and her mother had already handled it. Mark was a ghost in the process, a smiling puppet. "Whatever makes Amanda happy, Mom," he'd say when I tried to talk to him about it. "This is her day, you know." The final straw had been the house. A few months before the wedding, Mark announced they'd bought a house in a gated community, far more extravagant than a young financial analyst could possibly afford. I was stunned. "How, honey?" I asked him over the phone. "We just got a great mortgage deal, Mom, and Amanda's parents helped with the down payment," he said quickly. It was the first time I felt he was outright lying to me. There was a tremor in his voice, a defensiveness that set off alarm bells in my head. I had a nest egg, money I'd painstakingly saved over 30 years, money I'd earmarked for my own retirement, but had always told Mark was there for him in a true emergency. I had a sinking feeling this great mortgage deal was connected to my savings, but I couldn't prove it. Not yet. That's when I started digging. It felt like a betrayal of my son, but a stronger instinct, the instinct to protect him, took over. It started with a simple nagging suspicion, and led me down a rabbit hole of online records and discreet inquiries. What I found chilled me to the bone. It was a complex web of debt, deception, and desperation, all spun by my son to keep up with the life Amanda demanded, and hidden in the fine print of a private loan agreement was the key to it all, a signature I knew all too well, and a collateral promise that made my blood run cold. He had forged my signature to secure a loan against my retirement portfolio. I printed the documents, my hands shaking. I put them in an envelope. I wasn't sure if I would use them. I hoped I wouldn't have to. I hoped that today, on his wedding day, I would see a glimmer of the son I raised, a sign that he hadn't been completely lost. I hoped Amanda would show a moment of kindness, of warmth, that would prove my fears wrong. But as I stood there in that bridal suite, her cruel words echoing in the air, I knew there was no glimmer, there was no warmth, there was only the cold, hard reality of the situation, and the envelope in my purse suddenly felt very, very heavy. I walked out of the suite, my back straight, and found my assigned seat in the third row, far from the family aisle. I was just another guest, but I was a guest with a story to tell, and the reception was only a few hours away. The ceremony took place in a meticulously manicured garden overlooking the Ashley River. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows on a lawn so green it looked artificial. A string quartet played softly, the elegant notes of Pachelbel's canon drifting on the humid afternoon air. It was a perfect picture, a scene straight from a bridal magazine, and every single detail screamed money. Amanda's money. I sat in my designated seat, an island of dusty blue in a sea of strangers, and watched my son stand at the altar. From this distance, he looked like a handsome stranger in his tailored tuxedo. He was smiling, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing towards the back, not for me, but for his bride. When Amanda appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm, a collective gasp went through the crowd. She was breathtaking, a vision in white, and as Mark's eyes locked on her, I saw the adoration, the pure, unadulterated worship. My heart ached. He wasn't seeing the woman who had just dismissed me with such casual cruelty. He was seeing the fantasy she had so carefully constructed. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, full of poetic promises of eternal love and shared dreams. Amanda's voice was clear and steady, every word delivered with practiced perfection. Mark's voice, however, cracked with emotion. He spoke of how she'd changed his life, how she'd opened up his world and shown him what it meant to truly live. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from crying out. "This isn't living, my son." I wanted to scream. "This is performing." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. They sealed their union with a passionate kiss that was clearly meant for the cameras. As they walked back down the aisle, beaming and waving, their path took them right past my row. Amanda's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. There was a flicker of triumph in them, a smug little smirk that said, "See, I've won. He's mine now." I simply held her gaze, my expression unreadable, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a promise. The day wasn't over yet. The reception was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, a cavernous space with crystal chandeliers that dripped light onto tables laden with towering floral centerpieces. The clinking of glasses and the buzz of cheerful conversation filled the air. A live band was already playing smooth jazz in the corner. I found my table, number 23, tucked away near the kitchens, a clear signal of my status. I was seated with a few distant cousins of the bride's father and an elderly couple who were his former business associates. They were polite but disinterested, their conversation revolving around golf handicaps and stock portfolios. I felt completely invisible, which suited my purposes perfectly. I nursed a glass of Chardonnay, watching the happy couple make their grand entrance to thunderous applause. They went straight into their first dance. The song was one I'd never heard, a modern ballad with breathy vocals. Mark held Amanda like she was made of glass, whispering in her ear, making her laugh. To everyone else in this room, they were the perfect couple, the embodiment of a modern fairy tale. That I saw the cage. It was a beautiful gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless, and my son had willingly locked himself inside. Hope you're enjoying the story so far. If you are, do me a quick favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who enjoy stories just like this one. Thanks a bunch. The speeches began after dinner. Amanda's father, a portly man with a booming voice, went first. He spoke of his princess and welcomed Mark to their prestigious family, making a few not-so-subtle jokes about Mark marrying up. A few people laughed uncomfortably. Then the best man, one of Mark's college friends, gave a generic, harmless speech about their fraternity days. I waited, expecting Mark to say a few words, perhaps even to acknowledge his mother, the woman who raised him, but he just sat there, one hand holding Amanda's, the other holding a champagne flute, smiling as if he were a guest at his own wedding. It was Amanda who took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to share in the happiest day of our lives," she began, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "I want to especially thank my own wonderful parents, who have given me everything I could ever ask for and made this dream wedding a reality." She paused, blowing them a kiss. "And to my wonderful new husband, Mark, you've shown me a love I never thought possible. I can't wait to build our perfect life together." Not a single mention of me. It wasn't just an oversight, it was a deliberate, calculated erasure. The pain was sharp and white-hot, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had drawn the battle lines, and now, it was my turn to respond. I decided against a private conversation with Mark. It was too late for that. He had made his choice, siding with her at every turn. He wouldn't listen to me. He would just see it as his difficult mother trying to spoil his perfect day. No, this required a more direct approach. The truth needed a witness, and that witness had to be Amanda. I waited for the perfect moment. It came during the cake cutting. The band played a cheerful tune, as Mark and Amanda stood before a 5-tiered confection that probably cost more than my first car. They held the silver knife together, smiling for the cameras, the picture of domestic bliss. After they'd fed each other a bite in that staged cutesy way, Amanda turned to grab a napkin. Her path brought her just a few feet from where I was standing, having moved from my remote table to the edge of the dance floor. She caught my eye, and her smile tightened. "Enjoying the show, Helen?" she murmured, her voice dripping with condescension. "Immensely," I replied, my voice even and calm. I reached into my purse, and my fingers closed around the thick envelope. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hand was steady. "I have your wedding gift now," I said, stepping forward. "I think the timing is finally right." I saw the flash of annoyance on her face. She probably thought it was the locket, an unwelcome sentimental trinket. "Really, Helen, this isn't the time or the place." "Oh, I think it is," I said, cutting her off. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I held the envelope out to her. "Since you and Mark are starting your perfect lives together, I thought it was important that there be no secrets between you, especially when it comes to your shared financial future." Mark, who had been laughing with the photographer, noticed the sudden tension. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his smile faltering. Amanda hesitated, her eyes darting from the envelope to my face, then to Mark. A few nearby guests had fallen silent, their attention piqued by our quiet but intense exchange. With a flick of her wrist, she snatched the envelope from my hand. "Fine," she hissed. "Let's see what this is all about." She tore it open with an impatient rip. Her eyes scanned the first page, A formal letter from a private lending corporation. I saw her brow furrow in confusion. Then she pulled out the second document, the loan agreement itself. I watched her face as she read. I saw the exact moment the numbers registered. The loan amount, a staggering $250,000. The collateral, Mark's sole future inheritance, my life's savings, and the signature at the bottom, a clumsy, desperate forgery of my name, Helen M. Davies. The color drained from her face. The perfect porcelain mask of the happy bride cracked, and for the first time, I saw the real Amanda. Her head snapped up, her eyes blazing with a fury that was anything but beautiful. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at my son. Mark, she said, her voice a low, dangerous tremor. What is this? The band, oblivious to the drama unfolding just feet away, swung into a jaunty rendition of signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. Mark froze, the plastic smile melting off his face. He looked at the papers in Amanda's hand, then at me, a look of sheer cornered animal panic in his eyes. Amanda, honey, let's not do this here, he stammered, reaching for her arm. It's just some paperwork, a misunderstanding, she shrieked, yanking her arm away. Her voice, no longer the practiced, gentle whisper, was sharp enough to cut glass. The music faltered, as the band members finally sensed the shift in the room's atmosphere. Conversations died down, heads turned. The ballroom, once filled with joyous noise, was now draped in a heavy, expectant silence. We were the show now. $250,000 is not a misunderstanding. Mark, Amanda's voice rose with each word. She waved the papers in his face. This says you took out a massive loan. It says you used your mother's retirement fund as collateral, a fund you don't even have yet. And this signature, this is a forgery. Mark's face was beet red. He looked around wildly, at the sea of curious, judging faces, at his new father-in-law who was now striding towards them with a thunderous expression, and finally back at me. The look he gave me was one of pure betrayal. In his mind, I was the villain. I was the one who had ruined everything. He didn't yet understand that I was the only one who had tried to save him. I was going to pay it back, he said weakly, his voice barely a whisper. I got a bonus coming. I just needed some capital to get us started, to buy the house, to give you the wedding you deserved. The wedding I deserved. Amanda let out a laugh, a harsh, ugly sound. The life I deserved. I didn't sign up for $250,000 of secret debt. I didn't sign up for a liar and a thief. The words liar and thief hung in the air, sparkling with venom. I saw my son flinch as if he'd been struck, and in that moment my heart broke for him, for the mess he had made, for the boy who just wanted a shiny red bike, and the man who thought he had to steal to get the shiny, perfect wife. Amanda's father reached them. What is the meaning of this? He boomed, snatching the documents from his daughter's hand. He was a man accustomed to being in charge, to problems being solved quietly and efficiently. A public spectacle like this was anathema to him. He scanned the pages, his face growing darker with every line he read. He turned to Mark, his eyes cold with contempt. Did you use my daughter to secure your financial future, boy? Did you lie to her about your situation from the very beginning? No, I love her, Mark insisted, desperation making his voice high-pitched. I was going to tell her. I needed more time. Time to what? Dig a deeper hole? Amanda spat. My God, were you ever going to tell me? Or was I supposed to find out when the collectors came knocking on the door of our brand new house? A house I'm now realizing that we can't actually afford. She turned her back on him, a gesture of final, dramatic dismissal, and faced her father. Daddy, fix this, she demanded, her voice reverting to that of a petulant child. I stood my ground, a silent observer to the chaos I had unleashed. I felt no triumph, just a profound, aching sadness. This was the rot at the core of their relationship, and I had simply exposed it to the light. The beautiful, perfect wedding had unraveled, revealing the cheap, flimsy threads holding it together. Guests were whispering, some looking horrified, others morbidly fascinated. A few of Amanda's bridesmaids rushed to her side, cooing and patting her arm, glaring at Mark, as if he were a monster. Mark's best man hovered awkwardly nearby, unsure of what to do. I watched my son. He stood alone in the wreckage of his own making, stripped of his charm, his confidence, his bride. He looked utterly lost. He finally looked up, and his eyes found mine again. The anger was still there, but underneath it, I saw something else. Shame, a deep, gut-wrenching shame. Amanda's father took charge. In a low, commanding voice, he told the band leader to pack it up. He spoke to a hotel manager, and soon the staff began clearing tables with a funereal efficiency. The party was over. In less than 10 minutes, the grand ballroom was emptying out. Guests scurried away, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of failure and recrimination. I saw Amanda being led away by her mother, her face a mask of furious tears. Her father had Mark cornered near the sad abandoned wedding cake. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but the menacing tone was unmistakable. I had done it. I had pulled the pin on the grenade. The explosion had been bigger and more public than I could have ever imagined. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a mother who had just performed a painful radical surgery on her own child. The disease was cut out, yes, but the wound was gaping and raw. I turned and walked away, slipping out of the ballroom without another word. There was nothing more for me to do here. As I walked down the long carpeted hotel corridor, the muffled sound of Amanda's father shouting at my son faded behind me. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, a welcome relief from the overheated drama inside. I looked up at the starless Charleston sky and took a deep, shuddering breath. The fallout was just beginning, and the hardest part was yet to come. The 2 weeks that followed the wedding were the quietest, heaviest weeks of my life. The silence from Mark was absolute. My calls went to voicemail. My texts went unanswered. I learned through the grapevine, a sympathetic cousin of Amanda's father, who I'd been seated with, that the marriage had been annulled within days. Amanda and her family had moved with ruthless speed to erase Mark from their lives, treating the entire affair like a disastrous business merger, to be dissolved and forgotten. They kept the wedding gifts, of course. I spent my days in a haze of worry and second-guessing. Had I done the right thing? The image of Mark's humiliated face in that ballroom was burned into my memory. I had wanted to protect him, but perhaps I had only destroyed him. I wandered through my quiet house, the house where I'd raised him, every corner filled with memories of a happier, simpler time. I'd pick up a framed photo of him at his high school graduation, smiling and full of promise, and my heart would ache with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight in my chest. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, there was a knock on the door, not a confident rap, but a soft, hesitant tapping. I knew it was him before I even opened it. Mark stood on my porch, drenched and defeated. He wasn't wearing the designer clothes Amanda had picked out for him. He was back in his old, worn jeans and a faded university sweatshirt. He looked thin, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look at me, just stared at the welcome mat at his feet. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I stepped aside without a word, and he shuffled past me into the warmth of the living room. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, dripping onto the rug. "I lost the house," he said, still not looking at me. "The bank is foreclosing. Amanda's father made sure of it. He called the lender, told them about the situation. They called the loan." "I see," I said softly. "I'm staying on a friend's couch," he continued, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I almost lost my job, too. My boss called me in. said my personal dramas was becoming a liability. I waited. I knew this wasn't what he had really come here to say. Finally he lifted his head, and his eyes, red-rimmed and full of pain, met mine. "Why, Mum?" he whispered. "Why would you do that to me, in front of everyone? You humiliated me. You destroyed my life." The accusation, raw and full of hurt, was the opening I had been waiting for. I didn't get defensive. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at my son, the boy I loved more than life itself, and spoke the truth. "Your life wasn't destroyed at the wedding, Mark," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "It was being destroyed every day for the last 2 years. I just held up a mirror so you could finally see it. Did you love her? Or did you love the idea of her, the life you thought she represented?" He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The question hung in the air between us. "I watched you change," I continued, taking a step closer. "I watched you chase after a world that you didn't belong in, with a woman who didn't love you. She loved what you were willing to do for her, what you were willing to sacrifice. She didn't value your past, and she didn't value me, the person who gave you that past. Do you think a woman who truly loves you would ask you to erase your own mother?" Tears started to well in his eyes. "I just wanted to make her happy," he croaked. "By lying, by forging my name and gambling my entire life savings." The question was sharp, and he flinched. "Mark, happiness built on a foundation of lies isn't happiness. It's a stage play, and it was destined to collapse. I didn't knock it down. I just pointed out the cracks before the whole roof caved in on you." He finally broke. A sob escaped his throat, and he sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Mum," he wept. "I'm so sorry. I messed up everything. I was so stupid." I sat down next to him, my anger and hurt melting away, replaced by the overwhelming primal instinct to comfort my child. I wrapped my arms around his shaking shoulders, and he leaned into me, crying like he hadn't cried since he was that 7-year-old boy who'd fallen off his new red bike and scraped his knee. "I know," I whispered, stroking his hair. "I know." We sat like that for a long time, as the rain pattered against the windows. There were no easy fixes. I told him I wouldn't simply pay off the debt for him. The forged loan was a crime, and while I wouldn't press charges, the financial consequence was his to bear. It was a hard lesson, but one he needed to learn. He had to take responsibility. Over the next few months he began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. He found a small apartment he could actually afford. He worked overtime, taking on extra projects, and set up a strict payment plan with the lending company. It would take him years to pay it all back. He started coming over for dinner again. At first it was quiet and awkward, but slowly the old easy rhythm returned. We talked. Really talked for the first time in years. He told me about the pressure he'd felt, the insecurity that drove him to want Amanda's world so desperately. I told him about my fear, my loneliness as I watched him drift away. We were rebuilding our relationship on a new foundation, one made not of sacrifice and obligation, but of honesty and mutual respect. One Sunday morning, about a year later, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. I walked into the kitchen to find Mark standing at the stove, flipping pancakes. He grinned at me, a real, genuine grin, the one I hadn't seen in years. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said. "It's Sunday, after all." As we sat at the kitchen table, eating pancakes dripping with maple syrup, the comfortable silence was broken only by the clink of our forks. He was still in debt. He was still single. By the world's standards, and certainly by Amanda's, he was a failure. But as I looked at my son, his shoulders relaxed, a quiet confidence in his eyes. I knew he had never been more successful. He was free. I had been prepared to give up my family heirloom that day, the silver locket, but in the end, I had given him something far more valuable, the truth, and in doing so, I hadn't lost a son. I had finally gotten him back. Thank you for sticking with Helen's story until the very end. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might also enjoy it. Now, for the final details.